Kayla was born and raised in St. Paul, Minnesota, where it was bitterly cold for 8 months out of the year. Days were terrible and nights were worse. If she was lucky, her mother Irene paid the power bill that month. Those months were good. Kayla had lights and heat. More often than she cared to remember, though, Kayla was greeted by a shut-off notice. When that happened, it was just dark and freezing cold. Fortunately, the old kitchen stove was gas-powered. She would turn on all of the burners and make a bed of blankets and flattened pillows for herself on the kitchen floor. Usually around midnight, Irene would come home after finishing a shift at the gas station. If the power was out, Irene would lay down on the kitchen floor with Kayla and hold her tight. If the power was on, sometimes Irene would find Kayla still awake. Mom would give daughter some food she swiped from work. They sat together and talked until the little girl nodded off to sleep. These were the good times. The bad times came when he came. His name was Tom. After Irene quit her job at the gas station, she took a job as a waitress at a diner. It was better money. Guys always tipped pretty waitresses well. And Irene was pretty, so she did well. Tom was a regular. He was old enough to be Irene's father, but he stayed fit, so his age didn't show much. And he was nice, at first anyways. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. He had a nice smile and a folksy Midwestern charm that made her drop her guard. One day she agreed to meet him after work. One thing led to another and things changed. The girls didn't drive that far before they pulled into a driveway. Irene thought their troubles were over. This little house was warm and clean and the power was always on. Things were good. One day, Kayla noticed a bruise on her mother's arm. When Kayla asked, Irene said it was nothing. After the bruises started appearing, Kayla noticed the smell of alcohol when her mother hugged her. At first, the smell was there just a couple of times a month. Soon enough, the smell of alcohol and her mother's hugs were synonymous. The first time it happened, Kayla was 9 going on 10. Her mother was working a double shift. Kayla laid on her bed doing homework. There came a knock at the bedroom door. Tom entered and sat down on the bed. None of this seemed out of sorts. Irene and Kayla had lived with Tom for over 3 years now. Tom was a bit strange at times, but for the most part, he left Kayla alone. Every so often, the little girl caught him staring at her, but he would smile and politely avert his eyes or get up and leave the room altogether.
Kayla, you know I never had children of my own. In a way, I think of you like a daughter.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate that, Kayla replied cautiously. For the first time, she noticed how sweaty he was. Beads of sweat pooled up on his forehead, just under his receding hairline. Every so often, a big bead would break tension and succumb to gravity as it streaked down the man's temple and cheeks. With one arm sleeve, he wiped his flushed face and his hand came to rest on the back of Kayla's thigh. The little girl froze. She was unable to breathe with her heart lodged in her tightening throat. For some unlucky people, right here and now, this life is hell. For Kayla, that night began her hell. When Kayla turned 16, she met Aaron. Aaron was 19 and he was a troubled kid from Miami. He began running the streets, gangs, drugs, fights, shootings. It was the typical story. His mother sent him to Minnesota to stay with family and stay out of trouble. Within days, he was ready to leave. He stuck around for a few months until he met Kayla. Aaron asked her to hang out after work. She agreed. Kayla told her mother she would be staying at a friend's house. After that night, they were inseparable.
I'm going back to Miami.
What about me, babe? Questioned Kayla.
You can come with me if you want.
And there it was, her ticket out. When you're drowning in a swollen river, you cling onto anything that will keep you afloat, even if it comes with thorns. The day they left, it snowed. 30 hours of driving later, they arrived in East Little Havana, just outside of Miami. Aaron rented a motel room. They spent 3 days together in that room. To Kayla, it felt like a honeymoon. One night, Aaron told Kayla to stay put. He had to meet some old friends and get a few things figured out. That night, Aaron didn't come home. Day came and went with no word. On the second night, Aaron came back. Oh my God, where were you?
Everything is okay. I'm fine. I'm getting things lined up. We'll be straight.
After that night, things seemed to be okay. Aaron left almost every night, but he always came back. He was earning. Aaron never explained, and Kayla didn't ask. On the nights Aaron didn't leave, he took her out to eat a nice meal or see the sights. It was a new world for Kayla. Everything was fine until it wasn't. One night, Aaron didn't come home. The next day, she heard nothing. The third day was the same. Finally, the motel room phone rang.
Babe, something bad happened. I'm in jail. You have to leave. There is a brown paper bag in the closet. Take it and leave right away.
Wait, which jail? What happened?
Just do what I said. You're in danger. Leave now.
The fear in Aaron's voice was clear, even to an uninitiated white girl from the Midwest. The phone disconnected. Kayla went to the closet and quickly found a crumpled paper bag. She dumped the contents onto the bed. She counted a little over $5,000 and dozens of small clear baggies containing what looked like broken glass. Kayla put on her coat and secured the paper bag against her breast. She began walking. She made it 3 blocks before a car pulled up next to her. 2 men got out and positioned themselves on either side of her. Before she could even protest, they had her inside the back of their car. One man roughly ran his big hands over her legs and coat. He reached inside her coat and took the brown paper bag. "Where are you taking me?" Kayla began weeping.
Don't talk.
His tone was so matter-of-fact that she obeyed. They drove for a while, then parked in front of a small, dilapidated house. One man gripped Kayla under her arm and led her up to the front door. The other man followed as the car drove away. Her handler dragged her into a back bedroom. He roughly threw her in and told her to stay quiet, or they would hurt her. She believed him. She slumped down against the closed door and listened to their muffled voices.
We'll get the stuff back to them. We got all of it back. Okay, what about the girl? She's pretty. We'll put her to work at the house tomorrow.
Kayla began crying softly with a fear that sank into the pit of her stomach. She crawled to the far wall and curled into a ball, hugging her knees tight against her chest.
Shh. You have to be quiet or they'll hurt you.
The voice was that of a young girl. The closet door was ajar and the voice floated out of the darkness. Kayla's head whipped around. As her eyes acclimated, she could make out the head of a young girl. The girl was darker than even the blackness of the closet interior. As Kayla wiped away her tears, the door swung further. "Who are you? How long have you been there?" Kayla questioned.
Someone like you. Someone who's been hurt. We've been here a long time.
With that, the girl smiled. In the dark, her black face contorted into a Cheshire cat smile. Each tooth looked like small knives. The eyes that glinted palely now shined red. Her mouth opened and a long tendril-like tongue unfurled. It curled, then swirled around unnaturally, making a gruesome slurping sound. In horror, Kayla gasped and stumbled backwards. As she was falling, her hand reached for the floor to brace herself. When she landed, her hand fell upon something strange. In the dark, it was impossible to see, but the thing was a dead rat. Kayla's confused fingers squeezed. The coarse hairs bristled against her soft skin as she noticed the cold, loose skin. In moments of terror, it's interesting what comes into the mind of a damaged person. In her moment, Kayla thought of the first night Tom came into her room. Every awful, disgusting memory of that night and every night like it came flooding back. Waves of panic streaked throughout her body like flashes of lightning. Kayla's hand balled into a fist as the rat's body crunched and mushed in half. "We can save you, help you, protect you, make you strong. No one will ever hurt you again, Kayla." The girl invited sweetly. Simultaneously, she reached out with a slender arm that now looked unnaturally long.
He heard you. Let us help, and no one will ever hurt you again.
Kayla nodded. She sobbed hysterically as she struggled for breath. Yet, she timidly took the girl's hand. Suddenly, the feeling of coldness left Kayla's fingertips. A strange warmth tingled up her arm, filled her chest, then spread to her entire body. Kayla stopped crying even as the last few tears fell. Footsteps stomped down the hallway. The door flew open angrily.
Shut the fuck!
His sentence was cut short. With preternatural quickness, Kayla picked up a shard of broken window glass. In one smooth motion, she cut the man's throat from earlobe to earlobe. He stumbled forward and hit the ground. Both his hands reached for the open gash just over his Adam's apple, as warm, sticky blood gurgled out. The man kicked and struggled as a pool of blood spread under him. The other man heard the commotion and came down the hallway to investigate. As he stepped through the door, Kayla buried the bloody piece of glass deep into his gut. She quickly twisted and pulled in a horizontal motion. The penetration was long and deep and violent. When she pulled the glass out, the man's intestines spilled onto the floor. He instinctively dropped to his knees. In vain, he tried to gather up each long casing and shove them back inside of his belly. Seconds later, he collapsed. Kayla dropped the piece of glass onto the floor. She looked around. The two men laid on the floor, but there was no sign of the girl. Kayla calmly exited the room and went to the bathroom. Her face was covered in blood spatter. Her right hand was bright red and sticky. She turned the faucet on and began to wash. Kayla looked into the mirror. The face was hers, but the eyes were different. The next morning, Kayla found herself at a bus station.
Where are you going, sweetie?
Home, smiled Kayla. I miss my parents, especially my dad. The young woman behind the glass gave Kayla an inquisitive look as she pushed $400 in cash through the slot. Several of the $20 bills were stained in red. When they both made eye contact, the young girl noticed the dark, inky blackness of Kayla's eyes. Complete and utter dread rose up from the core of this young lady. A scream started to escape her constricted throat, then choked off into a meek whimper. Shh, please. I just want to go home, miss. Kayla slid $200 more in clean bills through the slot. The young lady looked away and inconspicuously palmed the extra cash. She quickly printed up a one-way ticket and slid it back to Kayla. St. Paul, Minnesota, departing in 45 minutes.